All right, so let's look at action research. Action research is a systematic investigation conducted by practitioners to provide information to immediately improve teaching and learning. The emphasis is on teachers, counselors, and administrators designing, carrying out, and using the results of a study in their immediate work environment. So when we look at action research is more designed for school settings. So that's why action research is very popular in high schools and in all schools. So why do we use action research? To understand how action research can be used to enhance practice. And that's why we need to use it, and that's why we need to make sure we understand it. So it's a very good little chapter I found in one of our books, and I just want to go ahead and share it with you. So let's scroll down. What is action research? With the recent emphasis on best practice, evidence-based practice, and data-driven decisions, so look at just those three phrases right there, best practice, which are usually pieces where people do research where they talk about what methods in a classroom that they use and they enjoy. Evidence-based practice is whenever someone uses research from data that they've gotten from a class, such as artifacts, which would be whenever they give an assignment and that assignment comes back, and then they use that to make a teaching practice. And data-driven decision making, that would be like test scores, and wherever you receive large amounts of data and then you change the school setting. The field of practitioner research and inquiry continues to grow. So that sentence right there is stating that when there's so much research and modifications of research going on in school settings, that practitioners, which are educators, are starting to do more research. And that's what's going to encompass this term action research, is whenever you're taking data, evidence-based, field-based modifications, and bringing that into the school setting. These studies have become commonplace and very important in schools. The emphasis of this chapter is on one form of practitioner inquiry, known as action research. Action research is an area that is gaining increased attention and recognition in the field of educational research. It was first used by Kurt Lewin, a social psychologist in the 1930s. And then we scroll down. He recognized how social problems could be addressed through group discussions. Lewin's group process included 4 stages: planning, acting, observing, and reflecting. This approach was the basis for the current approaches and models of action research. So planning, acting, observing, and reflecting. There are several definitions for action research throughout the time that they've been used since 1930s. And it says Lewin's original intent was an investigation conducted by the person or the people empowered to action concerning their own actions for the purpose of improving their future actions. So let's scroll down. Clearly, the word action signifies a significant departure from traditional research. The intent is to do something different in teaching, to change instruction or other practices based on more than personal experience or suggestions from others. So action research is not really to take a snapshot. Action research is to use the research that you do to make better teaching. So you're actually acting on the research you do. Because so much of the emphasis of action research is on teachers, you may find the terms teacher researchers or teachers as researchers in most of the studies. Benefits of action research. Action research has a number of benefits in the process of conducting action research. Teachers, counselors, and administrators collaborate with others and reflect meaningfully on why the results were obtained and what the results mean. So collaboration is a key element of it. This not only empowers teachers, it also helps them understand the benefits of existing literature in an area as well as evidence-based systematic inquiry. Empowering of a teacher is critical because many teachers, after a couple of years of teaching, start thinking that they're just kind of pushing the curriculum and going forward. But whenever you allow teachers to see that their decisions and their roadmap with collaboration with the administration as well as the counselors can actually have a modified curriculum and allows them to take ownership of the material. So action research allows teachers to be empowered. Very critical point. Finally, action research changes the climate of a school to a more open atmosphere in which it is standard practice to openly ponder teaching methods. They take risk also. We've gotten away from action research because there's so much on state tests. And but if you really think about it, state tests have so much data that's coming in. Why do teachers not try to do a little action research? Let's try this and see how it affects our scores. But the problem is it's a risk, and whenever state test scores are coming up, some principals don't want to take a risk because they don't want to have their scores go down. But the benefit is scores could go up. And look at this right here, benefits of action research. Impacts directly on practice, creates a system-wide mind of school improvement, enhances decision making, empowers those who participate in the process. There is one additional benefit that they think is very important. Implementing action research gives practitioners the tools to think more systematically about the effectiveness of their practices. The tools are principles of research. So the tools are allowing teachers to use research and become, hey, this works. I'm a better teacher because of this material. Action research differs from a traditional research in several ways. As discussed in this chapter, action research has a practical focus that can be conducted in a participatory or collaborative manner. The practical aspect of action research situates the focus of the investigation within a specific context, such as a classroom or the school. The results of the research are intended to inform a plan of action related to instructional decisions, curricular changes, or school policies. So at this point, we've looked at what the basis of action research is. It's research done in a school setting by teachers and administrators with the goal of improving instruction. So we're not looking at doing research just to take a snapshot and to write a paper. We're looking at research to change a school system. Look at the goal right here. New knowledge relevant to the local setting. Who determines the research? The teachers, the practitioners. Settings, schools and classrooms. Lit review, brief. We're getting to the point of this. We want to focus on secondary sources. Instrumentations, measures are often locally developed. Sampling, convenience. You're going to get the population that's in that school. I know we didn't go over convenience sampling too much, but convenience sampling is whenever you sample a population that is very convenient to you. It's right there. So I'm going to use the sample that's in my classroom. Design tends to be non-experimental or kind of a quasi-experiment. We're going to try this and do that. Data analysis, descriptive results are very specific to the individual school. So action research is really research designed for one school, knock it out, get the research done. It's publishable because many times you'll see articles say they'll have a title such as Common Core inside the Mississippi Delta School and effects of teaching strategies. So what that means is they're looking at just one school and they're talking about how a school changed some things. Those are pretty good action pieces if you ever do that. The next thing we're going to look at is conducting action research after this video.
Hello, my name's Carol Davenport. I'm Professional Development Leader at the National Science Learning Centre in York. And today I'd like to talk to you about the importance of continuing professional development and also about action research and how schools might like to use that to support the development of their staff. A number of schools have realised the importance of professional development being continuous and being something that the teachers are actively taking part in. And in order to support that, they are putting in place action research projects that their staff choose, design and run. These action research groups take place over a long time, so they are continuing professional development. They focus really closely often on one or two, well, usually one aspect of teaching and learning or of something that links with the school's development plan. One school that I'm working with up in the northeast have arranged their professional development time in their inset days so that every half term teachers get 2 hours to work on an inquiry, and that takes place over 12 to 16 months. Teachers are helped with a facilitator. They design an inquiry which they will carry out in their classroom. They'll then collect data, they'll analyse the data, and most importantly, they'll reflect on their practice and they'll find out what makes effective teacher behaviours. Hattie, in his research, often distinguishes between experienced teachers and expert teachers. Experienced teachers are those who have been teaching for a reasonable length of time, 4, 5, 6 years, who know how to teach, they do a good job in their classroom, but they don't develop. Expert teachers are those who are able to put in place effective behaviours, both teacher and learner behaviours, that encourage students in their classroom to make progress. Using action research really helps that development of expert teachers because it's an ongoing process. Teachers are reflecting on their practice, they're highlighting what's gone well, they're picking out what needs to be changed, and it's a really useful professional development exercise that a school can do without a great deal of external input. Both the National Science Learning Centre and the Science Learning Partnerships throughout the country are able to provide school support through action research. We have a number of courses that take teachers on the step-by-step process, that guide, that put in structure. And again, we try and make it continuing, so we have it so it's a longer-term process. So in a region, you might have 3 days of CPD spread over the year where people will come together, work between schools, share good practice between schools, go back into their school, carry out their action research, come back, refine their question, continue to change and to plan, and then to share their learning and to think about how that learning will be put in place in their school when they go back, so that they can then lead action research having done it themselves. So thank you for listening. I hope that my explanation of action research, how it can be used within schools to help develop expert teachers, and how the Science Learning Centres can support you, has been of interest. If you'd like to find out more about how the Science Learning Centres can support you and about any of our other courses, you can go and look at sciencelearningcentres.org.uk. Thank you.
Welcome to the presentation on action research. I'm Shive Jones and I'll be taking you through this overview. The premise of teacher induction is based on action research. The idea of acting on data and reflecting on results is the best way to improve your teaching practice. Everything you do for this program is a small piece that moves you through the various action research cycles. In the induction program, the action research process is also known as the Plan, Teach, Reflect, Apply cycle. It's a process in which you examine your practice by looking at data, developing an area of focus, creating a plan of action to address the focus area, acting on that plan, and then reflecting on the results. Action research is not a research project where you go to the library. It's not focusing on what is wrong, focusing on correct answers, or even writing a paper. Action research is really about focusing on ways to continuously improve practice by looking at evidence around you and taking action. I like to think of action research as teaching someone to fish rather than simply providing the fish. When you're a master in action research, you'll be able to address most any issue in your classroom by looking at the evidence and taking action in a way that effectively addresses the issue. This program's formative assessment is based on 3 modules that fit into the action research cycle. The initial cycles include collecting data, and this data leads to an area of focus where you can act on it and examine the results. So the initial cycles, the data collection, include a context for teaching and learning, also known as Module A, assessment of teaching and learning, also known as Module B, and then lastly, the inquiry into teaching and learning, which is the full action research cycle. The first cycle is the first module, Module A, and the formative assessment. Together with your support provider's assistance, you will begin collecting data about your students, including CELT scores, IEP information, identifying all your students' strengths, and identifying areas of need as well. You'll also learn more about your school and district, such as the school-wide discipline policy, AYP scores, conference schedule, and so forth. Lastly, you will collect information regarding resources available to you and your students throughout the community. At the end of this data collection, you and your support provider will discuss the data collected and begin having a conversation about how all this information will inform instruction. During the second module, Module B, Assessment of Teaching and Learning, you will identify what you know, what you want to know, and what you want your support provider to observe in your classroom. And when we talk about what you know and what you want to know, this is in relation to your classroom practice. After your support provider observes your classroom, together you will reflect on the observation and any insights you have gained. This will be followed by a self-assessment where you look at your teaching practice in relation to the California standards for the teaching profession and the induction program standards, which focus on pedagogy and universal access. The last module, Module C, is the inquiry. Now that all the data has been collected, it's time to look at an area in which you would like to improve your practice. This is the full action research cycle that the two initial data collection cycles led you to. When you bring together what you have learned about your students in the community, and given what you know about your strengths and areas for growth, what do you feel is an area to focus on for the next 6 to 8 weeks? For more information about action research, feel free to check out either of these websites, which provide a great deal of information around the topic. The Center for Collaborative Action Research is out of Pepperdine University, and the Education Alliance is out of Brown University. Thank you.
Okay, I showed you two videos there. One was a very informative one where she just discussed action research in kind of a setting, and the second one was they went a little bit further, and she used some slides, but she went a little bit further, and she actually talked about how to do action research. So that segues us into conducting action research. This chart right here shows us how to conduct research, and you see it goes into a loop. One thing is called select a focus topic or issue to study. Then you determine the design and how you're going to collect the data. You summarize and interpret the data. And then the last one is why it's called action research. You take your data and then you take action based on the findings. And that's why action research is very unique, is it allows you, once you take action, you can then go ahead and, if you desire, to do another research study to see how that worked out. So that's why action research is very good. If you're ever doing a comps question, or if you have to do a comps question for your master's degree, action research may be a really good way to answer a research question if they ask you to do a research design. So I like action research because it's very easy to put into a comps question. Let me scroll down. Step 1 is to select a focus, topic, or issue to study. You want to select a focus area is the initial step in any kind of research. And this 1 through 5 right here gives you some steps on how to select a focus topic involving aspects of teaching and learning, be something that you can control or have influence on. It wants you to be something that you can change or improve, and that's important. You really want to have something that you can change because you want to take your research and use it to change. Usually the experiences of the practitioner are used to identify topics for action research. So in that case, you really don't want to be a first-year teacher on the first day of your school talking about action research. You kind of want to sit back, enjoy a couple of months of teaching, and find out what needs to be done on your research. It shows you an example right here, and I'll just send this PDF to everybody so you can read this chapter. And it shows you an action research questions and process. Once an area is identified, it's helpful to reflect on the area through a process termed reconnaissance. Reconnaissance occurs as you take time to self-reflect on the area from the perspective of your own beliefs. Many teachers don't do this, and researchers sometimes don't do this, but I'll give you an example. An example would be Einstein. Einstein, he was a physicist, as everyone knows, and he was real smart. But many physicists, they sit and stare out their windows because they're constantly thinking of stuff, and that's how they brainstorm. And they do a lot of reconnaissance where they see an idea and they sit back and think and they think. That's the idea of very smart researchers who because there's no sense in writing and starting to do research if you don't know what you're talking about. And that's why one of the theories of relativity that he created, he was sitting on a bus and he'd been thinking for weeks and weeks about just doing research and thinking about this idea. And he says he remembers his idea was was sitting on a school bus or just a regular bus, and he could imagine the bus going the speed of light, and he looked and he could see a clock at the end of the city, and the clock was not moving. So that's where he got one of his theories of time and space. So reconnaissance is something that many people need to do. Once you get the problem in your idea, go ahead and think about it and where you want to go with that. It's a time of self-reflection, and we really want to do more of that. So reconnaissance is a key term where you take time to self-reflect on the area from the perspective of your own beliefs and from the context of the classroom of the school. Eventually, you'll want to focus on who, what, where, and when. Answering these questions will help you identify more specific research questions, and here are the questions that will help you guide through action research. Which students are having the most difficulty with grammar? What is the nature of the evidence used to confirm that this is indeed a problem? Are students having difficulty during class or with homework? Addressing these questions, the teacher might decide to focus on grammar, homework, and identify, and then you want to answer those questions as you go. It'll show you once again, look at this section right here. It's always helpful to do some reading on the topic. Once you start your action research and you say, I want to do this topic, go to ERIC, which we've talked about. Go to ERIC or EBSCOhost, and I'll probably go to EBSCOhost, which we know what that is, but go to EBSCOhost and just do some keyword searches, and see if anyone's done action research on that before. You don't want to reinvent the wheel, but action research is so site-specific that if you find an action research article, say in Washington, you can replicate, copy that action research study in your area and see how that works. And that's also publishable if you want to be publishable. It's great to publish your action research, but the main goal of action research is really to improve the school and to improve the students. Publications come secondary, which are good because if you publish your action research, then that allows me, whenever I'm doing keyword searches, and I can replicate your study, and that'll help more people across the nation. So reconnaissance allows you to sit back, think, and process the information that you've received, and then you can start your research project. You've already started it, you're just in the reconnaissance stage. Determining the design and data collection. The second step is doing action research is to determine what kind of design will be employed, the nature of the data that needs to be gathered, and how this data will be collected. So you've got to start putting all the pieces together. This right here is this is triangulation and action research. It just shows you a table. Triangulation is whenever you bring multiple sources into one point, and that's something that we want to definitely do, and that's something that you may want to look up. With the emphasis of action in action research, it is often recommended that teachers do a small-scale experiment by using an intervention and then seeing the effect of it on student outcomes such as achievement and attitude. So they're saying, like, if you're looking at reading and how reading does across the curriculum, and we're going to implement higher reading skills, then maybe I want to try a small little bit of reading on one classroom instead of doing it on all my students before I initiate my big action plan. So it's okay to test the waters. See, whenever we're doing research in other forms like qualitative, quantitative, mixed method, quasi-experimental, we don't want to create a bias or muddy the water by doing those pre-treatments like that. So with action research, it's okay to go in there and say, you know, I want to work with different color markers to see if that helps with my visual stimulation of my students. So I'm going to try it with one class just before I do my big experiment. So it's okay to play around with that. especially after you get past the reconnaissance stage and you want to get down to the design and you go, let me try this real quick. It's okay to do that. It says right here, the factor in determining the sample size as well as the study design will be what is needed for human subjects protection, depending on the school or the school district policies. This means that even though you are doing experiments inside your school, you may want to get you do want to get IRB approval, and you definitely also want to make sure you get school board policies. That's really easy to do because school board will allow you if you're doing really good research. Let's scroll down. This is examples of different types of action research. You have data collection techniques, and they went qualitative and then they went quantitative, and it'll show you different ways you can go and different ways you can branch on that one. You don't have to know all these terms, but it just shows you that when you're doing the reconnaissance stage, you actually can go different paths. But look at these right here. Observing, interviewing, documenting, test of knowledge. These are some things that you may want to look at. All right, so you've gathered your data, and now you're summarizing and interpreting the data. When quantitative measures are used, the best kind of summary and interpretation is descriptive, where you just give the facts, you give the statistics, very simple. The data needs to be clean to remove any outlets of any obviously inaccurate numbers. So we don't need to go too in-depth on that one because this is just a really good research class. We don't want to go really, really in-depth, high level, because we're not doing a major research project, but we're also not doing stats. So whenever, but I will give you from my first-hand experience, when you're presenting stats, make it clean, make it simple, make sure the numbers are right, and just make it very easy to be presented. The numbers do not lie, obviously, and you want to make it very good. I had someone this is one of my stories time. I had someone do a research project, and they spent like 6 months on it, and they came back and they said, well, the data's here, but there's no major conclusions. You know, I failed and I'm not happy. And I said, no, you just present that. You present that as no major changes, no major, and I said, that's fine. Our job is not to validate one way or the other. Our job is just to report the statistics. And they're like, oh, okay. So they had to embrace that. They felt that their dissertation was going to be groundbreaking and change the world, and they had to embrace the fact that as researchers, you just present the data. So just from this, it's kind of, I went off track a little bit, but when you summarize and interpret data, make sure you just present the numbers, make it clean, make it accurate. Validity in action research. Making a determination about the validity or the credibility of the conclusions drawn from action research is dependent on the research design. Now, it continues on talking about validity. You're always going to have issues with, is this instrument valid? Because you're using it on such a small group of subjects. And it's a convenient sample, and also the results are only applicable to your school setting because it's action research. So you really want to be careful with doing the validity checks of these and making grandiose statements that this instrument or this study is for all of my students in every classroom that I've ever taught. So looking at validity is controversial in action research because it's questionable, at least. But, you know, remember that, and it says some consumer tips. Just make sure that if you want to do some groundbreaking major research that's going to change the world, then change the textbooks, you can do action research. But remember that action research is always going to come up with, hey, you're just doing this for your school. But on the opposite end, action research is going to make the principal happy. They're going to say, man, you're doing a lot of things that's helping our school. You're also going to see more of a direct result. You're going to help students that you see every day, and you're going to use that research to make instruction better. So action research is very good for small settings. There's tons of journals that will publish it, so you can get published that way. But action research, and look at this, determine the motivation and involvement of the researcher. Are you wanting to be the next textbook? Do you want to be the next Howard Gardner? Well, he did a lot of action research, but then he had to write other pieces as well. Look for consistency between the research question and your methodology. Look at whether multiple methods on data collection have been utilized. So that's what action research is. And then it says anatomy of an action research study. This last section right here shows you, it gives a sample example of someone writing an action research. It has an abstract. It says right here, Allison Maryland, 4th grade teacher. So it's showing you that she is the researcher who's doing it, and she's actually a practitioner. It has the introduction. If you scroll down, it says background, significance. It says keep the review very brief. The intervention suggestions, they have the data collection, the data analysis. So you see experiencing, examining, researcher interpretation, shows direct involvement with intervention, and then the discussion. So with an action research, you don't really spend a lot of time on the methodology and the theoretical background and the huge review of lit. You just talk about how you wandered through the forest and helped your students. Action research is very good. And I'm going to put this PDF up. And I know some of y'all need some extra credit, and some of y'all would like some extra credit. But what I'll let you read this PDF all you want to. And I'm going to also put another video on here that'll back this part up. But if you want some extra credit work, because there's no assignment this week, if you'd like some extra credit work, answer these 5 study questions in a Word document and just email them to me. Real easy and real simple. I always put this in. I'm not going to advertise this, because I've found that whenever I just put a video up and I have no homework assignment, generally undergrad students, about 10% watch the video, and graduate students around 60% watch the video when there's no homework assignment attached to it. So to the 60% of students who are listening to this video, if you'd like extra credit and just to bank some points, so if you ever mess up on the final exam or anything, just answer these 6 questions and send it to me in a Word document. We'll say by next video. So you can do it by next Wednesday if you wish. Just send me an email with that. Thank you so much. And I'm going to put another video at this end of this, which is going to show you some more action research. And I hope you enjoyed the lecture.
I was thinking the other day about an undergrad class that I teach on study skills and how to be successful in college. And I was trying to figure out, how can I encourage my students to complete their homework, to turn it in? They don't always turn it in, and when they do, they don't seem to follow all the writing suggestions that I give them. Sometimes it's just punctuation and formatting, but other times it's basic organization and even a thesis statement. But I'd really like them to simply put in the effort and turn in the work. Without work, I can't help them with their writing. And this is how action research starts. I have a problem. Well, actually, I have 2 problems. If we get looking at it, I have a lot of problems, but let's just focus on 2 today. Problem number 1, my students don't like to do their homework. And problem number 2, their writing's not so great. Now I need to determine some common causes of the 2 so I can find a possible solution. Number 1, maybe my students are simply lazy. Yeah, but that doesn't really get me anywhere. I can't actually work with that. Number 2, perhaps they don't see the benefit of doing homework. That one might work, but other than failing them, passing out Fs, or maybe giving them candy when they walk in with their homework, it's not going to be too fruitful. Now there is a third option. Maybe they are not entertained enough by the homework assignments that I assign. I'm not suggesting that they should feel like they entered a circus every time they do homework. But are they engaged? Or are they always bored? Now this is something I can work with. How do I motivate them? How do I get them involved in their own learning? I need to look at what I'm doing already. 1, I usually assign a chapter of reading each night and ask them to write maybe a 2-page response in which they relate the concept from their chapter to their life, to their schoolwork. For example, describe your reading habits. Do you like magazines? Books? Do you maybe read mostly online? Maybe you just read for school. Maybe you read for leisure, out of school material. Discuss how reading techniques that you found in Chapter 8 can improve not only your reading, but your study habits too. So what am I not doing? Well, what if I had them write online? Maybe blogging. They could even link other websites, videos, and findings online to the responses for further explanation and support. I could cut the writing requirement down by half, having them only write one page, and then they could respond to 2 other students' reflections. That would make up for the other page. Sound familiar? And since I teach 2 sections of the course, I could even implement 2 different frequencies of online writing and compare them. One class could have the majority, if not all, their writing online and always responding to each other, while the second class alternated each assignment, handing in maybe half of the assignments in a hard copy form, while the other half were online. There are 10 assignments altogether, so this would work out nicely. And then I get to compare. So now I've thought of this problem, I've looked at some causes, and I have a general idea of what I want to do, but what's my question? Well, the first thing, it needs to be important. It needs to address the problem directly and for the benefit of the students, and probably myself too. Number 2, it needs to be manageable. The question should not be too broad, like how can I help the students turn in homework, but not too narrow either. I really need to look for something right in the middle. Third, it must be contextual to the class. I don't want to reconstruct my whole class or add extra work on myself or my students. It shouldn't be about what I need to add onto my class to improve it, but what I can change or adjust to improve the situation. Fourth, the question needs to have focus, as it actually relates to the classroom, to the problem at hand, and to the student. Next, I should consider whether my question is an open-ended question, not just a yes or no answer. I don't want to start with did or anything. Try starting with how, or what, or why. If you're looking for a yes or no answer in this field, you're barking up the wrong tree, am I right? And finally, the question should be reflective. You should be able to reflect upon your findings, not only in the data and what it says about your students in the classroom, but also what it reflects upon yourself and your strategy. So let's get back to my students. Okay, there's a guy, and there's a girl. Okay, now here we're back. The problem is that they don't like to do their homework, and generally, I need them to do that. And some causes that I thought of is that they're not engaged, they're bored, and they don't see the benefit. And I've reached a general idea of how I might look at a solution. I decided that I'm going to use some technology, some blogging, and responding back and forth through that. So now I'm back to, what is my final research question going to be? Well, here's what I come up with. How will incorporating technology, the internet, into homework assignments improve participation and motivation? Let's see if it fits our characteristics. 1, is it important? Yes, it's about student success and how I can improve my teaching strategies. Is it manageable? Well, the use of technology focusing on the internet is narrow enough to place some limitations so it doesn't get out of hand, but it's not too broad. Is it contextual? It fits into a day-to-day schedule, not adding more than I can handle. Does it have focus? It's about the problem and students, so yes. Is it open-ended? There's a how, so I don't have to plan on getting a perfect answer, but I get a variety of possible solutions in the data. And can I reflect upon it? Well, yeah. It will tell me about student motivation and how they respond to one another, and it will help me better understand the technology in education. Now, of course, I could add other questions to this research, like how do peer evaluations improve the quality of student work, in which I formalize the student responses a little bit more, and maybe even set a peer evaluation form for them to fill out. And you know, I always have one of those peer evaluation forms handy for them. There we go. There it is. Other questions that I could ask is, what is the relationship between student participation and motivation with multimodal work? I probably want to ask them to have a multimodal aspect to all of their essays, because that's when I start adding way too much work for them. And really, it's way too much work for me. And that's no good. Look at all this stuff. We got the computer going on, we have the multimodal, we have the essays, and then it goes over here, and we have the more homework. When am I going to grade all of this? And we've talked about this before. This is just driving us insane. Focus on maybe one question, and that's about it. And that's about how you do it. First, look at any problem that you have in the classroom. Then look at the common causes that are leading to that. Are they bored? Are they not engaged? What's going on? Do you need more technology? But of course, these are just ones that I've used. Then you need to determine a possible plan of action. Look at that question. Is it having all of those characteristics that we just talked about? And then develop the question. And after that, you have the next step, the fun part, doing it. But that's a completely different notebook.